The catalyst. The Galactic Council chamber hummed with energy, its vast hall filled with delegates from every corner of the universe. Alien species of all shapes and sizes discussed trade, peace, and treaties, their voices blending into a chaotic melody. It was a regular day in the heart of the universe's diplomatic hub, where problems were debated endlessly, and decisions took centuries. That day, however, the usual calm was shattered. The doors at the end of the chamber burst open, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. A human ambassador stumbled in, their uniform torn, their face pale. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Humans were not known to make dramatic entrances. They were one of the younger species in the universe, often considered fragile and insignificant. But the sight of this ambassador, bruised and battered, was impossible to ignore. The ambassador, a man named Marcus Hale, stopped in the center of the room. He took a shaky breath and looked up, his eyes burning with something the council rarely saw in humans: rage. The murmurs faded as every alien delegate focused on him. "I come here today," Marcus began, his voice hoarse but steady, "not to negotiate, not to plead, but to warn." The room remained silent, the air thick with tension. Marcus scanned the faces around him: reptilian scales, glowing eyes, tentacles, and furred visages, before continuing. 2 weeks ago, a human colony on the outer rim, Celesta Prime, was attacked, not by pirates or rogues, but by the Xorith Empire. At the mention of the Xorith, an imposing reptilian species known for their conquests, several delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The Xorith representative, a towering figure with dark, scaled skin, smirked, leaning back in his seat as if this was a minor inconvenience. "The colony was peaceful," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "Families, farmers, scientists. We had no military presence there. And yet, the Xorith obliterated it. Men, women, children, slaughtered." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Some delegates looked uncomfortable, while others appeared indifferent. To them, such violence was a grim reality of the galaxy. Species rose and fell, empires expanded, and the weak were often trampled underfoot. "What do you expect us to do about it?" a delegate from the Vera Consortium asked, his voice laced with boredom. "The Xorith have always been aggressive." Marcus's lips twitched into a bitter smile. "I'm not asking for your help. I know better than that. Humanity has always stood alone, and we've survived. But I'm here to tell you this: you've never seen what humans are capable of when pushed to their limits." A low chuckle echoed from the Xorith representative. "Is that a threat, human?" he asked, his voice deep and mocking. "Your kind barely has the technology to lead your own solar system. What can you possibly do against an empire like ours?" Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he stared directly into the Xorith's glowing yellow eyes. "You've mistaken our kindness for weakness. You've mistaken our patience for fear. But there's one thing you should know about humans. We don't start fights, but we finish them." The Xorith representative laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Several other delegates joined in, amused by what they saw as empty bravado. But others watched Marcus closely, sensing something deeper in his words. "You'll regret this," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the laughter. "Not just you, Xorith, but all of you. When humanity's temper snaps, the universe will feel it." Without waiting for a response, Marcus turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the Varric delegate broke the tension with a dismissive snort. "Humans are dramatic creatures, aren't they?" But not everyone was so quick to dismiss Marcus's warning. A few delegates exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves. They had studied human history, and they knew one thing. When backed into a corner, humans didn't just survive. They fought back with a ferocity that could shake even the strongest of empires. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, on the war-torn remains of Celesta Prime, The first seeds of humanity's fury were already taking root. What the Xoreth thought would be an easy conquest would soon become the catalyst for something the galaxy had never seen before, a united and enraged humanity. And the universe had no idea what was coming. Humanity's dark history. Far away from the bustling Galactic Council, Earth's leaders sat in a dimly lit room beneath the United Nations headquarters. Holographic screens displayed images of the destruction on Celesta Prime. Burning cities, crumbling towers, and the lifeless forms of civilians scattered like fallen leaves. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of machinery. "We've been underestimated again," General Elena Vasquez said, her voice cold and sharp. She stood at the head of the table, her piercing gaze scanning the faces of Earth's most powerful leaders. "The Xoreth think they've crushed us. They think we're too small, too weak to fight back." A few heads nodded grimly. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy had been that of a peaceful, adaptable species. They were the diplomats, the explorers, the ones who sought to learn rather than conquer. The Xoreth's attack wasn't just an insult. It was a challenge. Perhaps they've forgotten. Elena continued, her tone growing darker. "What happens when humanity is pushed too far?" Behind her, the holograms shifted to scenes from Earth's past, images of destruction and resilience. The bombing of Hiroshima, the trenches of World War I, the fiery skies over London during the Blitz. These were moments of unimaginable pain, but also of unyielding resolve. "Our history is written in blood and fire," Elena said, her voice steady. "We've fought wars that nearly destroyed us, only to rise stronger. We've faced extinction, both from nature and from ourselves. And every single time, we've adapted, we've overcome." The room remained silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Everyone in the room understood the truth. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its diplomacy. It was its ability to endure, and to strike back with terrifying precision when the time came. Meanwhile, on the Xoreth homeworld, on the other side of the galaxy, in a towering citadel carved from black stone, the Xoreth Emperor sat on his throne. His scaled fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest as his generals reported their victory over Celesta Prime. The humans offered no resistance, one of them said, a cruel smile spreading across his reptilian face. They were soft, unprepared, just as we expected. The Emperor nodded, his glowing yellow eyes narrowing. "Good. Let this be a lesson to the rest of the galaxy. Anyone who refuses to submit to the Xoreth will suffer the same fate." He leaned back, satisfied, as the generals discussed their next move. None of them noticed the faint flicker of unease in the room. Deep down, even the Xoreth weren't entirely ignorant of human history. They knew the stories, how humans had turned desperate situations into victories, how they had transformed even the simplest tools into weapons of devastating power. But arrogance had blinded them. They believed their advanced technology and military might make them untouchable. They couldn't imagine a scenario in which humanity, scattered and seemingly powerless, could pose a threat. They were wrong. Seeds of fury. Back on Earth, the plans for retaliation were already in motion. Scientists, engineers, and strategists worked around the clock, transforming seemingly mundane resources into tools of war. They didn't have the advanced weaponry of the Xoreth, but they had something far more dangerous: ingenuity and desperation. In a hidden research facility, a young engineer named Rachel Lynn studied a hologram of a Xoreth warship. Her team had spent weeks analyzing the data smuggled out by human spies, looking for vulnerabilities. Finally, she found one: a small, nearly imperceptible flaw in the ship's energy shields. "This is it," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "This is how we hit them." Meanwhile, in the vast deserts of Mars, a group of soldiers trained relentlessly. They didn't have the Xoreth's strength or size, but they had something the aliens couldn't replicate: determination. Each step, each punch, each shot was fueled by the memory of Celesta Prime. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. A whisper in the galaxy. As humanity prepared, whispers began to spread across the universe. Small, seemingly insignificant stories emerged. A Xoreth convoy disappearing near a human colony. Strange signals disrupting Xoreth communications. Rumors of humans building something in secret. Other alien species, long oppressed by the Xoreth, began to take notice. Some laughed, dismissing the humans as reckless fools. But others felt a flicker of hope. If humans, the so-called peaceful explorers, were willing to fight back, perhaps the Xoreth weren't as invincible as they seemed. Humanity's unseen power. Back in the Galactic Council, debates rage. Some delegates argued for sanctions against the Xoreth, hoping to avoid a larger conflict. Others warned against getting involved, fearing retaliation from the Empire. All the while, Marcus Hale's warning lingered in their minds. "You've mistaken our kindness for weakness." Those words, spoken in anger and pain, had taken root. For the first time in centuries, the universe began to consider the possibility that humanity wasn't as harmless as they appeared. In the shadows, humanity's rage continued to grow. The Xoreth had lit a fire they didn't understand, and when it finally erupted, it would consume everything in its path. The universe didn't know fear yet, but it would. The first strike. The Xoreth fleet cruised through the void of space, their black, jagged ships gleaming under distant starlight. A convoy of supply vessels, escorted by a handful of battlecruisers, made its way to a Xoreth outpost on the edge of their empire. It was a routine mission, a simple transfer of resources. The commanders aboard the ships didn't expect trouble, after all. Who would dare challenge the Xoreth? But as they reached a desolate region of space known as the Shadow Belt, their sensors began to flicker. "Report," barked Commander Vorik, his scaled hand slamming against the console. His yellow eyes scanned the data streaming across the screen, but it made no sense. What's happening to the sensors? The crew scrambled, their claws clicking on the consoles. "Unknown interference, Commander," one officer said nervously. "It's jamming our systems. Origin unidentified." Vorik growled low in his throat. "Humans," he hissed, though he didn't believe it. The thought was laughable. Humans didn't have the technology for advanced electronic warfare. Yet the jamming grew worse, the convoy systems glitching and failing. Alarms blared as life support and weapon systems flickered. And then the darkness came. The Ghost Fleet. In the pitch black of the Shadow Belt, the Xoreth couldn't see them. Human ships, painted with cloaking tech and built from salvaged parts. They drifted silently, their engines cold, waiting for the perfect moment. Among them, Captain Sarah, Ghost Callahan, gave the order. "Activate EMPs. Let's show them what human ingenuity can do." The human fleet unleashed a series of electromagnetic pulses, enveloping the Xoreth convoy. The alien ships shuddered as their systems failed completely, plunging them into chaos. Lights went out. Engines sputtered. Even their advanced weaponry fell silent. On board the Xoreth flagship, Vorik roared in frustration. "What is happening?" Before anyone could answer, the first human strike teams breached the convoy. A new kind of warfare. The Xoreth had fought countless battles across the galaxy, but never like this. Humans didn't fight by the rules of war. They didn't rely on overwhelming power or brute strength. Instead, they used creativity, cunning, and a deep understanding of desperation. Small, agile human ships darted between the massive Xoreth vessels, planting explosives in critical locations. Inside the corridors of the flagship, human commandos moved like shadows, disabling systems and sowing chaos. They carried makeshift weapons, modified mining tools, improvised explosives, turning the Xoreth's own technology against them. Vorik's frustration turned to fear as reports flooded in. "They're everywhere," his officer shouted. "We can't track them." For the first time in his life, Vorik felt helpless. The mighty Xoreth fleet, feared across the galaxy, was being dismantled by a species they had dismissed as weak. The message. As the Xoreth fleet burned, Captain Callahan stood aboard her ship, watching the destruction unfold. She felt no joy, only grim determination. They hadn't started this war, but they would end it. "Broadcast the message," she ordered. Across the wreckage, surviving Xoreth ships received a transmission. Vorek, now bloodied and desperate, watched the human ambassador, Marcus Hale, appear on his flickering screen. "You thought we wouldn't fight back," Marcus said, his voice calm but filled with cold fury. "You thought you could destroy us without consequence. You were wrong." The message was simple, but its implications were clear. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was striking back. The universe takes notice. The destruction of the Xoreth convoy sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Reports of the attack spread like wildfire. The Xoreth, once seen as unstoppable, had been humiliated by a species most had considered insignificant. Other oppressed species began to whisper among themselves, if humans could fight back, perhaps they could too. Some secretly reached out to human leaders, offering intelligence and resources in exchange for a chance to join the resistance. On the Xoreth homeworld, the Emperor's rage boiled over. He ordered an immediate retaliation, vowing to crush humanity once and for all. But beneath his anger, a seed of doubt took root. How had the humans, with their primitive technology, managed to disable an entire fleet? For the Xoreth, the attack was an anomaly. For humanity, it was only the beginning. Humanity's fury unleashed. Back on Earth, celebrations were muted. The success of the first strike was only a small victory in a much larger war. Leaders like General Vasquez knew that Xoreth would retaliate with overwhelming force. But they also knew something else. Humanity was ready. In hidden bunkers and orbital stations, scientists worked tirelessly on new weapons and defenses. Soldiers trained harder than ever, honing the unconventional tactics that had given them an edge. Civilians volunteered in droves, determined to contribute in any way they could. Humanity had become a singular force, united by pain and purpose. They didn't seek war, but they refused to bow. And as the galaxy watched in awe and fear, one thing became clear. The Xoreth had awakened a sleeping giant. The universe wasn't prepared for what came next. The rise of rage. The Xoreth Emperor stood in his war chamber, surrounded by his generals. The holographic map of the galaxy shimmered before them, marking human territory with small, insignificant dots. Yet those dots now seemed to burn brighter, like embers threatening to ignite a wildfire. How did they do it? The Emperor growled, his voice reverberating through the cold obsidian room. A species so primitive, so fragile, how did they cripple an entire fleet? The generals shifted uncomfortably, their scales glinting under the faint light. No one dared speak. The humiliation of the Shadow Belt defeat had sent ripples through the Empire. It wasn't just the loss of ships, it was the fear that had spread among the troops. For the first time, the Xoreth weren't the hunters, they were the hunted. "Retaliate," the Emperor commanded, his yellow eyes narrowing into slits. "Burn their worlds. Crush their spirit. Show the galaxy what happens when they defy the Xoreth." Humanity's call to arms. On Earth, the call for vengeance had spread like wildfire. The attack on Celesta Prime and the victory in the Shadow Belt united humanity in a way that hadn't been seen in centuries. Old rivalries dissolved. Nations that once competed for resources now shared them freely. Humanity had one goal: survival through strength. In a secret underground bunker beneath the ruins of Celesta Prime, engineers and scientists worked around the clock. Their task was daunting: turn scraps of salvaged Xoreth technology into something humanity could wield. Among them, Rachel Lynn had become a legend. "We can't outgun them," she told her team one night, her voice carrying the quiet intensity of someone who refused to accept defeat. "But we can outthink them." Her latest invention was something the Xoreth wouldn't expect: a weaponized virus designed to target their ship systems, turning their advanced technology into their greatest weakness. The virus would be silent, undetectable, and devastating. "It's not just a weapon," Rachel said, staring at the glowing schematic on the screen. "It's a message." Fear finds the Xoreth. The Xoreth didn't expect the next strike. They had fortified their outposts near human space, their fleets patrolling the edges of their empire. But humanity didn't attack the edges. They went straight for the heart. In the dead of night, the Xoreth capital world, Karaksen, lit up with explosions. Power plants malfunctioned, military command centers went dark, and supply lines crumbled. It wasn't the humans themselves who struck, but the virus Rachel's team had unleashed. Xoreth soldiers scrambled to understand what was happening. Their most advanced systems turned against them. Defense grids fired on friendly ships. Communication channels broadcast distorted human voices, a chilling mix of defiance and rage. The Emperor watched from his palace as chaos engulfed his empire. For the first time, his scales felt cold. This wasn't war as he understood it. This was something darker, more personal. Humanity wasn't just fighting to win. They were fighting to make the Xoreth fear them. The symbol of unity. Back on Earth, the rise of humanity's rage was accompanied by an equally powerful rise in hope. Across every colony and settlement, the story of Celesta Prime was retold. It wasn't just a tale of loss. It was a rallying cry. In one of the largest cities on Mars, a group of artists created a massive mural on the side of a towering building. It depicted a human hand gripping a shattered Xoreth warship, with the words, "We are the fire," emblazoned above it. The image spread across the galaxy, a symbol of humanity's resilience and defiance. On distant worlds, oppressed species began to mimic the mural, painting it on their own buildings. Humanity had become a symbol of resistance, a spark of hope in a galaxy long dominated by fear, turning the Xoreth's strengths into weaknesses. While the Xoreth scrambled to repair the damage from the virus, human strategists worked to exploit their confusion. In hidden outposts, soldiers trained for guerrilla-style combat, mastering the art of striking hard and disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. On the Moon Titan, a team of engineers created makeshift railguns out of salvaged mining equipment. Though crude compared to Xoreth weaponry, these railguns had one advantage. They were unpredictable. Xoreth shields weren't calibrated to block such primitive yet powerful attacks. General Elena Vasquez, now the de facto leader of humanity's military efforts, stood before her troops one evening. Her voice echoed through the underground bunker. "We're not fighting just for ourselves," she said. "We're fighting for every species that's been crushed under the Xoreth's boot. They think they can break us. But what they don't understand is this. We've been broken before. And every time, we come back stronger." Fear spreads beyond the Xoreth. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the once dominant Xoreth Empire struggled to contain the human uprising. Whispers of the humans' growing power spread to the furthest reaches of space. Some alien species, long oppressed by the Xoreth, began to rise up, inspired by humanity's defiance. Others, however, hesitated. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were reshaping the rules of war. To ally with them might mean sharing in their victories, but it could also mean sharing in the Xoreth's wrath. For humanity, it didn't matter. They had already made their choice. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to ensure no one would ever underestimate them again. The Xoreth's growing doubt. In the war chamber, the Xoreth Emperor stared at the latest reports. Shipyard sabotage. Troops demoralized. The virus continued to spread, disabling more of their critical systems every day. His generals no longer stood tall. Their shoulders slumped, their confidence shattered. "How?" the Emperor whispered to himself, his claws digging into the armrest of his throne. "How do they keep winning?" No one had an answer. The humans hadn't just risen in rage. They had turned that rage into a force that even the mighty Xoreth couldn't contain. And as the Emperor stared at the burning holograms before him, he realized a chilling truth. The Xoreth didn't just face a war. They faced extinction. Fear spreads. The Xoreth had never known defeat, until now. The loss of fleets, the viral attacks on their infrastructure, and the growing unrest among their allies were cracks in the once unbreakable foundation of their empire. And those cracks were widening. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy witnessed something unprecedented: fear in the eyes of the Xoreth. The ghosts in the dark. On a remote Xoreth mining colony, workers toiled under the twin suns, extracting rare minerals for the Empire's war machine. The overseers, towering reptilian enforcers, watched over them with their usual cold efficiency. But on that day, the hum of the machinery stopped. Lights flickered. Communication lines went dead. "What's happening?" barked the overseer, his voice tinged with irritation. Before anyone could respond, a single human transmission crackled through the colony speakers. It was the voice of Captain Sarah, Ghost Callahan. "You took from us. Now we're taking it all back." Explosions rocked the facility as hidden charges detonated in sequence. Human forces emerged from the shadows, striking swiftly and vanishing just as quickly. By the time reinforcements arrived, the colony was abandoned, its resources gone, and its workers liberated. The Xoreth commanders called it a fluke, a minor nuisance, but as reports of similar attacks poured in from across the Empire, they could no longer deny the truth. The humans were everywhere, and they were unstoppable. The rising tide of rebellion. The Xoreth weren't the only ones feeling the effects of humanity's war. Across the galaxy, oppressed species began to see the humans as something more than just a nuisance to the Xoreth. They became a symbol of hope. On the forested planet of Marnath, the insectoid Klin gathered in secret. For centuries, they had lived under Xoreth rule, their resources drained, and their culture suppressed. Now, they watched recordings of humanity's victories, their antennae twitching with newfound determination. "They defy the Xoreth," one Klin elder said, his mandibles clicking. "Perhaps it is time we do the same." The Klin weren't alone. On icy tundras, in volcanic wastelands, and in the sprawling megacities of the galaxy, the seeds of rebellion began to sprout. The Xoreth, once seen as invincible, now seemed vulnerable. Fear in the Emperor's court. The Xoreth Emperor sat in his grand throne room, his scaled fingers gripping the armrests tightly. Before him, his advisors and generals argued, their voices echoing through the cavernous chamber. "We must respond with overwhelming force," one general bellowed, slamming his fist onto the table. "Send the entire fleet to Earth, burn it to ash, and leave the rest of the Empire unguarded." Another countered, "The humans will use it as an opportunity to strike elsewhere." The Emperor remained silent, his glowing yellow eyes fixed on the holographic reports. Every strategic move the Xoreth made, the humans countered with ruthless precision. Every time they tried to predict the humans' actions, they failed. "Enough," the Emperor said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell silent. "We underestimated them. That mistake will not happen again. Prepare the armada. If humanity wishes to fight, we will end them." Despite his commanding tone, doubt lingered in his mind. The humans had turned their anger into something far more dangerous, a relentless, unpredictable force. And the galaxy was taking notice. Humanity's new allies. On a hidden human outpost, deep within an asteroid field, a delegation of alien representatives met with General Elena Vasquez. Among them were the insectoid Klin, the aquatic Kylones, and the nomadic Grathians. Each had suffered under Xoreth rule, and each saw in humanity a chance for something they had never dared hope for: freedom. "You fight without fear," said Varlith, a towering Grathian with shimmering crystalline skin. "You have shown the galaxy that the Xoreth can bleed. We wish to fight with you." General Vasquez nodded, her face grim but resolute. "This isn't just our fight anymore. The Xoreth thought they could crush us, but they've only united us. Together, we can bring them down." The alliance was fragile, built on desperation and shared pain, but it was a start. For the first time, Humanity wasn't standing alone. Psychological warfare. The humans understood something that Xoreth didn't. War wasn't just about weapons and battles. It was about breaking the enemy's spirit. Across Xoreth-controlled space, humanity launched a campaign of psychological warfare. Hackers infiltrated Xoreth broadcasts, replacing propaganda with haunting images of human resilience. Entire fleets found themselves outmaneuvered by what seemed like ghosts, their supply lines cut, and their morale shattered. In one of the most daring moves, a group of human operatives infiltrated the Xoreth capital, projecting a hologram of Marcus Hale directly into the Emperor's throne room. The message was simple but chilling. You thought we would bow. You thought we would break. But now, the galaxy knows the truth. You are afraid. The hologram vanished before the guards could react, leaving the Emperor seething with rage and unease. The cracks deepen. The Xoreth Empire, once a monolith of power, was beginning to fracture. Fear spread through its ranks, infecting even the most loyal soldiers. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were reshaping the galaxy. On Earth, General Vasquez stood before a map of Xoreth space, her expression unyielding. This is no longer just a war, she said to her team. It's a reckoning. And we're not stopping until the Xoreth Empire falls. The galaxy held its breath, watching as humanity's fury continued to rise. The Xoreth had lit a fire they couldn't control. And now, that fire was spreading. The universe would never be the same. The turning point. The Xoreth Armada loomed like a dark tide over Earth's orbit, its colossal warships casting shadows on the blue planet below. This was the Emperor's response. Overwhelming, devastating force. The Xoreth believed this show of power would crush humanity's spirit once and for all. But humanity wasn't cowering. They were waiting. The calm before the storm. On the ground, Earth's cities had gone eerily silent. Civilians had been evacuated into underground bunkers, and above, the skies were empty of commercial flights. It was as though Earth had paused, holding its breath. General Elena Vasquez stood on the command bridge of a hidden bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, monitors displayed the Xoreth fleet's positions, their massive ships forming an unbreakable blockade. They think we're beaten, she said, her voice calm but resolute. They think this is over before it's begun. Beside her, Rachel Lynn monitored a glowing console, her fingers dancing over the controls. They'll regret that assumption. Humanity's secret weapon. Unknown to the Xoreth, humanity had spent months preparing for this moment. Beneath Earth's surface and in the asteroid belts of the Sol system, scientists had been working on Project Ironfire, a weapon that was as bold as it was dangerous. At its heart was a new form of energy, born from the fusion of human ingenuity and reverse-engineered Xoreth technology. The weapon was untested, risky, and could potentially destroy its operators. But in the face of annihilation, humanity had no choice. The key to Project Ironfire wasn't its raw power, but its precision. Unlike the Xoreth, who relied on brute strength, the humans had designed their weapon to exploit the one vulnerability the Xoreth couldn't protect against: their overconfidence. The trap springs. As the Xoreth prepared to launch their assault, their sensors picked up an anomaly. A single human ship, a sleek, cobbled-together craft nicknamed Eclipse, emerged from behind Earth's moon. It sent out a transmission directly to the Xoreth flagship. "This is Captain Sarah Callahan of the Eclipse," a calm, defiant voice declared. "We've been waiting for you." The Xoreth commanders laughed at the audacity of a single ship challenging their entire fleet. But the laughter stopped as Eclipse activated its engines and charged straight at the flagship, weaving through incoming fire with impossible precision. "What is this madness?" roared the Xoreth fleet commander as the human ship closed the distance. It wasn't until it was too late that they realized Eclipse wasn't attacking. It was bait. The sky burns. As the Xoreth fleet focused its fire on Eclipse, humanity's true plan unfolded. From hidden orbital platforms, asteroid fields, and even Earth's surface, hundreds of cloaked human ships sprang to life. These weren't warships in the traditional sense. They were packed with makeshift railguns, EMPs, and Project Ironfire's experimental energy weapons. The Xoreth fleet, caught off guard, found itself surrounded. Human ships darted between their massive vessels, exploiting their lack of maneuverability. EMP bursts disabled key systems, leaving some Xoreth ships dead in space. And then Project Ironfire was unleashed. Rachel Lynn herself oversaw the activation of the weapon from Earth's command center. "Target the central dreadnought," she ordered, her voice steady despite the stakes. A beam of shimmering, iridescent energy erupted from a hidden platform in low Earth orbit. It struck the Xoreth dreadnought's energy shields, which flickered and then collapsed entirely. Moments later, the ship exploded in a fiery cascade, sending shockwaves through the Xoreth fleet. Doubt creeps in. On the Xoreth flagship, chaos reigned. The fleet commander struggled to rally his troops, but the psychological damage had already been done. The Xoreth, for all their might, were losing to a species they had deemed inferior. In the Emperor's war chamber, he watched the battle unfold with growing disbelief. His empire's greatest fleet was faltering. How had this happened? How had humans, with their primitive technology and limited resources, managed to turn the tide? "Pull back," he commanded at last, his voice low and bitter. "Regroup. This is not over." Humanity's unyielding spirit. As the Xoreth fleet retreated, Earth erupted in celebration. The victory wasn't just a military triumph, it was a declaration. Humanity had stood against the mightiest empire in the galaxy and survived. But the leaders of the resistance knew the fight was far from over. General Vasquez addressed the gathered troops and leaders in a secure broadcast. "This isn't the end," she said. "The Xoreth will come back, and they'll come back harder. But today, we've proven something. We are not weak. We are not prey. We are humanity. And we do not surrender." The galaxy watches. News of the battle spread quickly. Across the galaxy, oppressed species watched in awe. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had faced the Xoreth and won. For the first time in centuries, the Xoreth's iron grip on the galaxy seemed to loosen. On distant planets, rebellions began to stir. The Klin, the Axylons, and the Grathians all saw the humans' victory as a spark, a chance to rise up against their oppressors. Humanity, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had become a symbol of defiance and hope. A fragile victory. As the debris of the battle floated in orbit, Rachel Lynn stood on the observation deck of the command center. She looked out at the stars, her expression pensive. "We bought ourselves time," she said quietly to Marcus Hale, who stood beside her. "But the Xoreth won't stop. They'll come back with everything they have." Marcus nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant void. "Then we'll be ready. They've already made their biggest mistake. They gave us a reason to fight." Earth remained on high alert, its defenses stronger than ever. But humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or strategy. It was their indomitable will. The Xoreth had learned to fear humanity. But they hadn't yet learned that fear would never be enough to stop them. The new balance. The Xoreth fleet limped back to their homeworld, their once mighty armada reduced to fragments of its former glory. The universe was watching, and for the first time, the galaxy saw the Xoreth not as invincible conquerors, but as a wounded predator forced to retreat. On Earth and across human-controlled space, the mood was triumphant but tempered. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The message was clear. Survival required more than just strength. It required strategy, alliances, and an unyielding spirit. The Xoreth's desperation. In the Xoreth Emperor's Grand Hall, the atmosphere was suffused with tension. The Emperor sat motionless on his obsidian throne, his claws digging into the armrests as his advisors whispered nervously. Reports of rebellion were flooding in from every corner of their empire. The insectoid Klin had taken back their forested homeworld. The aquatic Gylones had sunk entire Xoreth fleets using planetary traps in their oceans. Even the nomadic Grathians, long scattered across the stars, had united under a single banner, inspired by humanity's defiance. The Emperor rose from his throne, his towering figure casting a shadow over the room. "If the galaxy believes we are weak," he growled, his voice a rumble of fury, "then we will remind them of the cost of defiance." But even he knew the truth. The Xoreth were no longer the galaxy's ultimate power. Their empire was crumbling, and the cracks were growing wider with each passing day. Humanity's plan. On Earth, General Vasquez gathered humanity's greatest minds in the underground command center. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of hope and determination. Holograms of the galaxy displayed the growing alliances between humanity and other rebel species. "We've proven we can fight," Vasquez said, addressing the room. "But we can't win this war alone. The Xoreth still control vast territories, and their retaliation will be brutal." Rachel Lynn stepped forward, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "That's why we won't wait for them to strike. We'll take the fight to their doorstep." The room erupted in murmurs. It was a bold move, but boldness was what had carried humanity this far. "Our target," Vasquez continued, "is the Xoreth homeworld, Carixen. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to end this once and for all." The final assault. The united fleet of humans and their new allies assembled near the edge of Xoreth space. It was a sight the galaxy had never seen before. Ships of every size and shape, from human-made vessels patched together with salvaged parts to the sleek, organic ships of the Klin and the crystalline warships of the Grathians. The fleet was a patchwork of cultures, technologies, and histories, but it was united by a single purpose: to break the Xoreth once and for all. As the fleet advanced, the Xoreth defenses scrambled to respond, but they were no longer facing a single enemy. They were facing the combined fury of every species they had ever oppressed. The fall of Carixen, the battle for Carixen, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Xoreth unleashed their full might, deploying planetary shields, orbital cannons, and their most advanced warships. But the rebels fought with the desperation of those who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Rachel Lynn's virus struck again, infiltrating the Xoreth systems and turning their defenses against them. Human railguns tore through Xoreth shields, while Klin shock troops infiltrated key installations on the planet's surface. Grathian warships used their crystalline structures to reflect and amplify human energy weapons, creating devastating beams of destruction. Amid the chaos, Captain Sarah Callahan led a daring strike on the Xoreth Emperor's palace. Her team fought their way through relentless waves of Xoreth soldiers, their determination unshakable. The Emperor's reckoning. In the final moments of the battle, Captain Callahan stood face to face with the Xoreth Emperor. He was wounded but still radiated an aura of dominance. Around them, the palace crumbled, fires casting flickering shadows on the walls. "You fought well, human," the Emperor said, his voice low and grudgingly respectful. "But you cannot destroy the Xoreth." Callahan leveled her weapon, her expression cold and unyielding. "The Xoreth destroyed themselves the moment they underestimated us." With a final shot, the Emperor fell, and the Xoreth Empire began to collapse in earnest. Across the galaxy, rebellion surged, toppling Xoreth control planet by planet. A new era. Months after the fall of Carixen, the galaxy found itself in a new era. The Xoreth were no longer the dominant force. Their remaining forces had fractured into splinter groups, each too weak to pose a significant threat. In their place, a new alliance emerged, led by humanity. It wasn't an empire or a ruling body. It was a coalition of equals, united by the shared dream of freedom and cooperation. The galaxy, once dominated by fear, now had hope. Humanity's warning. On Earth, General Vasquez addressed the galaxy in a broadcast that reached every corner of known space. "We never wanted this war," she said, her voice firm but calm. We never sought to conquer or destroy. But when pushed, humanity doesn't break. We rise. Let this be a message to anyone who would threaten us or our allies. We do not fight because we love war. We fight because we value peace. The universe remembers. As the galaxy rebuilt, stories of humanity's defiance spread far and wide. Children on distant worlds learned of the humans who had faced the mighty Xoreth and won. Monuments were erected not just on Earth, but across countless liberated planets, honoring the sacrifices of those who had fought for freedom. The galaxy would never forget the moment humanity stood up and showed the universe what they were capable of. For the first time in history, the universe wasn't ruled by fear, it was guided by unity. And it all began with a species the galaxy had underestimated. Humanity had risen, and the stars would never be the same again.